Now more than ever, innovative technologies are fueling change and sparking new ways of thinking. Collaboration between corporations and startups is key to staying at the forefront of these trends. However, finding the right startups can be expensive, time-consuming, and ineffective. But Plug and Play is here to help. As a corporate partner, you will gain access to a whole ecosystem of innovation. Discover startups that meet your tech interests. Stay updated on the latest trends and network with industry peers. We will help you during every stage of your innovation journey, no matter where you are and where you want to go. Get in touch today.
All right, Kavi, you about ready to kick this thing off?
Yeah, let's do it. I see people joining in.
Yeah, we got a few people trickling in still. Should be good. Hey, everybody. Welcome to BUIDLers on the Roof. I'm so glad you could join us. To sort of preface this, we've been doing these monthly crypto meetups and these crypto webinars where we've been having on these amazing founders. And before we were having them just do their startup pitches and telling you their ideas, but really, like, a lot of the feedback that we had been receiving from the attendees and from our partners that were showing up to these was that they loved the insights and the Q&A sessions at the end. So Kavi and I have sat down and we've shifted the focus of what we're wanting to do here to really bring on people who are building stuff in Web3 to share what they're seeing in the space, share their knowledge and their insights. And so we're going to try to take a unique approach with this. We're going to bring on some of our friends that are building some really neat tech in Web3, but we're also going to try to bring three unique perspectives. So we want to have somebody who is in the weeds, in the thick of it, building out products. They're the ones who are, nose to the ground, know what's coming up in crypto. And then we also wanted the perspective of a crypto investor, which is Kavi here, who's been on our crypto ventures team and has been leading a lot of our investments in this space. And then myself, who's a crypto novice who is sort of had a traditional background in finance and then was looking at crypto and saying, okay, this is definitely what's going to supplant everything, and it's going to touch all of the industries. And so yeah, we're going to try to bring those three perspectives of having a crypto founder, a crypto investor, and then a crypto novice. So Kavi's here to ask the smart questions, I'm here to ask the dumb ones. And so Kavi, I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Patrick. I'll give a little bit of context because today I know everyone knows from the invite our theme is Web3 security, but I want to give some context as to how big of a problem this is before we bring on our amazing founders. So Web3, as we've all seen the headlines, is plagued with these mistakes, these hacks, these scams, and they've cost users billions of dollars. So just to put that into perspective, the total amount of value stolen or lost in Web3 till date is 45 billion. And the growth of this fraud is actually outpacing user adoption. So Web3 fraud is growing at 695% year over year. User adoption is 170% year over year. So it's a massive problem. And the reason, or one of the reasons this is such a big problem, is because blockchains are designed to be immutable by default, meaning the data that they're storing and the smart contracts that they're running are largely unchanging over time. And this is the same feature that allows them to build these really useful applications on top, but it also is what makes them aggregate a lot of value, makes them a tempting target for attackers. And so the consequences of this are, one is the smart contracts code that is being written on these blockchains. They can't be easily changed or updated to patch security flaws over time. Two is that when assets are stolen, they're irrecoverable largely and then extremely difficult to track. And then finally is user mistakes. So things like losing your private keys or sending it to the wrong address. These are final and these are costly. So we get now how big of a problem this is. And I want to introduce Micah, or call onto the stage Micah, Emmanuel, and Gaurav, who are three really great founders building great companies in the Web3 security space.
Yeah, just to add what Kavi's saying here, Web3, like security in Web3 is obviously like a huge starting point for so many businesses and so many corporations that want to start offering Web3 products and be able to get into the space. And so, yeah, we want to welcome on our BUIDLers. If we go to the next slide, go over what a BUIDLer is. BUIDLer it's a play off of the word HODL, which if you're sort of in crypto Twitter, you'll see all over the place, where it stands for hold on for dear life. And it's the idea of, buy and hold the line. And then BUIDLer is sort of the Ethereum version of that, where it's It's rather than holding on for dear life, building things and building useful stuff. And so we want to welcome to the stage our founders here. And then, yeah, to go ahead and Emmanuel, if you want to kick things off, we'll just go in order of the slide here. Just tell us what you're doing, how you got into it, and yeah, what your background is.
Thanks for the warm intro, Patrick. Nice to meet everybody. Awesome to be on a PMP call for the first time. My name is Emmanuel. I was born in North Carolina, grew up in New Jersey, but my family is Nigerian. And that's always been kind of a big part of a lot of the things that I've worked on over the years, because I've grown up as the middle brother between 5 brothers, and we've just like basically, looked very internally for people to found ventures with and work on different types of interesting problems with. So today, I'm actually working with alongside one of my brothers who co-founded a prior venture with me, but we're building Shield. Shield automates user protection for Web3 platforms. So we are developing an API that it basically offers scam detection models to different Web3 platforms and developers, just to make it easier for them to protect their users. And we'll definitely go into more detail on what we're doing and other details about how I kind of got into the space. But yeah, happy to push over to Micah.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. Happy National Coffee Day. Apparently there's National Coffee Day and International Coffee Day, and International Coffee Day is October 1st, so we get to celebrate very close together.
Hey.
Yeah, I know. I have my mug here, so I hope you all are celebrating with me. I am Tokyo born and raised, so I was raised in Japan, also spent a lot of time in Minnesota, but I'm calling from San Francisco today in the Bay Area. I have spent most of my career in the cybersecurity and fintech fields. And then most recently, I was at Microsoft as a cybersecurity engineer for government. And I am also the CEO of Webacy. Webacy we founded in 2021. And our grand vision is building a safer Web3 for all. So as the intro was very good, covering all the issues and safety and security in Web3, we are building to help support that and make that some of it go away, at least. But we're building safety and security tools and infrastructure, including things like panic buttons, backup wallets, hack protection, crypto whales, even all of the above.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. Thanks, Micah. Thanks, Kavi and Patrick, for having me. So I'm an immigrant. I've been in US for close to like 10 years, but like I was born and raised in India. And a lot of things that we take for granted in US actually is not the case. Like I recently learned yesterday that there's $5 billion worth of cash in the matrices in Argentina. So 1/5 of their cash actually is in a mattress because people just don't trust the central agencies, governments, and stuff. So these are the kind of problems that can easily be solved by crypto. Like people are using USDC and apps like Sereno to do that. So these are like some of the examples that really excite me about crypto. And that's where like I want to contribute in the emergence of crypto as an asset class for the institutions. Because institutional adoption is very critical if we have to see crypto in a wider use case. And people talk about what's the legit use case. I think there's a lot of things happening. We need a wider adoption on things. That's what I'm building on. So I'm building Imina. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Imina, where we help monitor and proactively defend crypto assets for institutions. Where something is going wrong, we detect in real time. When I say wrong, I mean hack and exploit sort of things, and proactively defend their positions without needing access to the private key. I'm happy to share more as we dive deeper, and thanks for having me.
Thank you guys so much. Those were some really awesome backgrounds. I'd like to kick things off with a question, and then feel free to take it amongst you guys however you feel is best, and feel free to interpret it how you think is best. But the question is, we mentioned at the beginning, there's all these risks, right, with Web3 security, these large-scale hacks, so things like Ronin 630 million, Wormhole 360 million, the scams, phishing, rug pulls, and then user error. But out of all these threats, what do you guys feel poses the greatest security threat to Web3 adoption? So whether it be by individuals or businesses, and I guess the second part to that would be, how are you building your companies around these threats? Which one do you think are more important than others? Feel free to take it away. maybe we could start with the manual and then go as you guys see fit.
Yeah, I will just start by saying I'm really interested to hear Gaurav's perspective on this, because I think he's a little bit more involved in kind of like the smart contract auditing area side of things. But myself, I think apart from there being protocols that are being developed and there are issues with these protocols or vulnerabilities that are causing them to get hacked, and you're seeing like these huge hacks, at the same time, you're seeing that even if your protocol is, you know, secure against outside attacks, that doesn't necessarily mean that your protocol is secure against like internal attacks in the form of like users who are trying to use your platform for malicious purposes. So I'll give you a very clear example. OpenSea, the largest NFT marketplace, you know, they have not been exploited in any type of major way yet. But if you go on Twitter and just search like OpenSea scam, you'll find hundreds of people who've been scammed, thousands of people who've been scammed on OpenSea over the past, you know, several months, because like there are protocols that people can upload onto OpenSea. There's no kind of like gating or there's no filter. For the most part, if you have an NFT collection, it's going to be on OpenSea, regardless of whether that's like a scam collection or not. So I do see this as a problem that's, you know, today it might be only a big problem on the largest platforms, but over time we're going to see, as we see more user adoption in Web3, and platforms just start to get bigger naturally, you're going to see that malicious actors are going to start to frequent more of these platforms that are seeing a significant mass of new users in space, especially people who are like not as familiar with blockchain. And so that's the primary, you know, area of issue that our team at Shield is trying to address today. We're looking to make sure that platforms like OpenSea, wallets like MetaMask, your most legit Web3 technologies, you can use them without having to, you know, DYOR, do your own research for every single time you're about to make a transaction. We would prefer that, hey, as you're transacting, there is already some type of security layer being embedded into your user experience.
Yeah, just to add to that, I know that when the first time I purchased an NFT, it was kind of a nightmare, honestly. Like I was having to get into the Discord and figure out if what I was buying was actually legit, because there was a bunch of copies and clones of people trying to take advantage of the minting process that happened there. And so, yeah, I'm excited to hear that somebody's working on that and building something that can help me at least in that regard. But yeah, guys, I guess let's go to Micah as well to hear some of your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to pinpoint particularly one problem. It's a mix of different things. And even as the space gets more structured and more guardrails are in place in terms of security, even through smart contracts, the infrastructure themselves, even Google still has 0-day issues and hacks, right? So it's kind of a lifelong process of learning and iterating. But if I had to pick something, I think user education is probably the biggest barrier to onboarding. I think the stat out there is something around over 90% of all hacks and scams are actually very simple phishing scams or kind of just lack of user education scams. So if you can start to cover that, or at least put in some sort of protections for users that are new to the space and maybe don't have the background in terms of turning off your Discord, like really small things, right? Not minting from malicious websites, turning off your Discord DMs, all these little things that people actually don't think about when they first join the space. I think if we can cover just some of that general user education, we cover a really wide array of attack vectors that's possible in the space.
Definitely, I think I echo what both Emmanuel and Micah said. So if let's look at the history of how things panned out. You know, the crypto came to be in like early 2010s, and you know there were like a lot of trailblazers who were comfortable with the risk, and you know like Gold Rush jumped into the bandwagon, and they were okay with like not knowing a lot of things, like you know comfortable with the risk. But as we are going towards a wider adoption, expectation is there. Like I cannot expect my mom to, you know, go through the smart contract, like what's happening, such like that's not going to be possible. For a wider adoption, we need the education piece as well as a layer like, you know, what Emmanuel talked about, like user should not worry about whether what I'm doing is safe or not safe, the high level. So those are like the key elements that needs to be in place before we can think of like any significant. When I see significant, I mean billions of people using crypto.
Yeah.
So oh, go ahead, Gabi, go ahead.
Gaurav, you mentioned, thanks, Patrick. Gaurav, you mentioned like, I can't expect my mom to go look through this code. You know, everyone's saying it's always open source. You could go look at it, but we can't expect the end user to do that. And like, I'm wondering, with things like the Terra collapse, billions of dollars get wiped out, but how can end users go in there before and say, hey, the tokenomics, the game theory here is off. This protocol is eventually going to fail. How can we expect, end users, whether they be individuals or businesses, to like know that in advance?
So that is exactly what we are in this business of it, by the way. So in Luna crash, would have been able to project, hey, at around 3% or something, the numbers are way off. It's not going to recover unless there's a bailout. I would argue user, you cannot expect like a typical person to understand that kind of dynamics. By that logic, 2008 crash should not have happened, because you could have figured out, okay, the subprime mortgage is going to shits. Also, there has to be entities, maybe like Moody's, how Moody's kind of players are there in the typical TradFi world, where people can trust them as a proxy. So code is there. It's not that everyone's going to go check out the code and take care of it, but there has to be entities trustworthy. And when there's sufficient number of them, you can kind of, it's a proxy at a high level. And I would say people are relying on Twitter to learn a lot of things, but I think there are like better ways we can kind of go about things as well.
Yeah.
Micah, Manuel, what do you guys think?
I almost want to ask another question to Gaurav on this topic. Like,
yeah,
go for it. Seriously, go for it.
Yeah. So a lot of these hacks have been happening. Some of them that come to mind, the Nomad bridge hack, for example, was a recent one. In these other cases, like, were you guys able to flag something like before it happened? Or because I'm just kind of poking even further at Kavi's question, like, who knows, like, what's the next platform to go down? Like, how are people actually able to preemptively get out of those types of things?
Yeah, I have to answer that. So Nomad, I would say, was not even a hack. I think that falls in the bucket of that that we were discussing earlier. Someone had like a bug in their code, and it kind of landed in production. And when you send a certain message, you will be gifted by up to 100 wrapped bitcoins. It's very hard problem to catch. Like, and we cannot catch that issue is happening because of this. What we can catch is there's something anomalous going on. Typically, you'll have like a single digit or double digit rate of flow of funds, but now you're like this bridge is kind of gifting like such a high number of tokens, and when it's paying out to Gaurav, there is no corresponding lock token on the bridge on the other chain. So these are the kind of signals you would have got. So that's why we're in the asset protection space as compared to root cause. Root cause is much harder problem, and we cannot do it all the time. So it's like a cat and mouse game at a high level, whack-a-mole. So yeah. There will obviously be like zero-day hacks, as Micah mentioned, but we are making progress as we go now.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Kavi. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, Micah mentioned we're just going to iterate our way into like better security. We're going to put up guardrails. Gaurav, you're saying, there's always going to be zero-day attacks. It's like a cat and mouse game. That leaves me wondering, like, I guess this is relevant for the folks in the audience. It's like, will financial institutions, will like these businesses be comfortable using even the ones we consider blue chips today, the Aves, the compounds, the maker DAOs? Will they feel comfortable putting a large amount of their assets in that at some point? And if the answer is yes, when do you folks think that arrives? Or like, Micah, maybe from the consumer perspective, when do you think like the end individual is comfortable just putting a lot of their assets on chain?
Yeah, I have an answer, and then I have a question for Gaurav again, because I want your opinion. But I think these institutions, I think a group of them just banded together to create their own exchange, right? I think they announced this a couple weeks ago. I can't remember the name of it, but a couple giant big banks just announced like a group exchange that they're making. So I think if they feel like they can't trust other places to build it correctly, they're going to try to. And so we'll see how that ends up going. And if they bring in a ton of traditional retail investors into the crypto space, I'm not going to complain if they created their own. So that's pretty cool. But my question was kind of about this, even more like centralized exchanges and stuff. When they end up locking up, are there any signals for consumers that have assets stored in there that it's approaching that? Because at some point, at this point right now, too many consumers are wondering if they're going to be able to retrieve the funds that they were promised that would be released at some point. It's kind of in a limbo right now.
Yeah, so this is the question I got asked yesterday also. I think like you cannot read their books, so it's very hard to say. But yeah, I would say like at least I'm not aware of how we can do right now. But yeah, it's something that if we can do, will really improve the overall trust in the ecosystem, like, Mount Cox kind of stuff. Yeah, you cannot read minds, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I honestly tell my dad, like I tell my dad to invest in crypto, and he trusts me, so he's doing a little bit, but like, how does he know what happened with Voyager and what happened with all these other crypto lenders isn't going to happen? I guess you answered it. There might not be really a way to know. So I guess we're in this stage where it's like, trust the biggest ones, trust Coinbase, these publicly traded companies, they're audited. Is that really just all it is, or what do you think?
So just to add to that, like Voyager stuff. So I would say things went south because they were basically operating a hedge fund. From my understanding, they were basically operating a hedge fund and portraying as a market, money market kind of return. So that's where you kind of come in, where there's a different expectation from the customer side. It's a safe investment, and I'm getting like say 6%, 10% return. But behind the scene, you are like making very aggressive investments and such. That's where I think regulation will solve it. But had the same thing been done in a transparent way, that like then you can see, okay, the protocol or like this app promise XYZ, are they doing XYZ or not? So for that kind of scenario, I think regulation will probably solve it.
Patrick, sorry, I cut you off a couple times.
No, you're
but
good.
It makes sense, Gaurav.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is it only a regulatory solution to that issue, or is there some path that you see to being able to maintain like maybe even like a security protocol to be able to audit and vet this, something that people can trust and verifies that what's going on behind the scenes is they're being good actors, or is it purely going to have to be government intervention that solves this?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. So when I said regulation, I didn't mean actually the government. It could be any third that have to. Yes. Yeah. So any centralized organization or centralized protocol company, whatever, they have to be open to a third party looking into the things, and that has to be a case. Unless they are completely on chain and anyone can kind of verify and understand it, there has to be a third party. Third party could be a government, third party could be an auditing firm, and so on and so forth.
Emmanuel, could you I think your perspective would be super cool here, because you're servicing these crypto companies, whether it's exchanges, whether it's the OpenSeas, the MetaMask. Could you dive a little deeper into what you guys are building, and then how eventually, I guess, does this help the end user, the customer using the MetaMask or using the OpenSea?
So I would start off by saying, like, kind of as a transition from what we were just talking about, the promise of crypto, a large degree of the promise of crypto is decentralization. So even though the centralized players will, generally be the ones who kind of do a lot of the initial onboarding, Coinbase is going to be the best on-ramp to get into the decentralized space, to get into things like MetaMask and OpenSea. However, I think as it stands right now, I wish I could tell someone, hey, I would rather have you put your money on MetaMask rather than Coinbase. And that is how I feel about my own funds, right? I don't like to put my funds on the centralized exchanges because I've had bad experiences with things getting locked up because I'm Nigerian and such. So, but as it stands, because the decentralized space is riddled with so many issues and scams all over the place, you feel like you're picking, the lesser of two evils, and you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And so for us, again, to go into a little bit more detail on it, I think we talked about phishing scams a moment ago, in terms of where they originate. A phishing scam might be a link that is written in differently, right? A 0 instead of an O for OpenSea, or they switch the L with a capital I, little things like that. But once you actually get to that link, generally there is still a smart contract. Sometimes it's something else. Sometimes it's they'll ask you to enter in your seed phrase. But I think the more complex ones, they do tend to be smart contracts. You think that you're minting an NFT, or you think that you're claiming an airdrop or something like that. And then you see a transaction appear on your screen, and it says oh, do you want to sign this transaction? And that's basically all it says. You can read a little bit more into the details, and maybe you'll see a word do you want to give an approval on certain assets in your wallet. But generally, when you see that transaction signature come up, we're so used to just clicking sign. It's very similar to on platforms like Facebook, or Instagram and Web2, where like in order to use these platforms, you have to sign some types of terms and conditions. No one reads through those terms and conditions, right? But technically you could. When it comes to smart contracts, which is essentially your terms and conditions within a decentralized space, even if you wanted to read those terms and conditions, like you really have to be a developer to do that. Or at least someone who is like has been in the blockchain space for a while and has like done a lot of work to understand what a lot of those like on-chain data points and terms mean. So at some level, I think like just simplifying the transactions. I think a lot of people are working on solutions in this space, which is exciting, but just like simplifying what is a transaction actually asking from you, or simulating what is the outcome of this transaction going to be. Like, you know, if there's a button on my screen that says like, yes, like, oh, sign this, I should be able to know what's going to happen after I sign it, right? It's similar to like, if you get a new Twitter tool, or you're giving some type of, you're using like one of those tweet automation tools, and you have to like give it access to your Twitter, you will see in very plain language, this can read your tweets, this can post new tweets, this can do X, Y, Z, right? And if you don't like any of those things that it's doing, you can just reject. So that's part of kind of like where we're trying to build, just make things a lot more simple at the transaction level, and show our users, for any transaction you sign, you should know what the outcome of this transaction is going to be, just to make it very, very simple to, you know, stay away from things that are obviously malicious.
Mike, I feel like you have something to say here.
Yeah, I really, really like what Emmanuel is describing. And I think like if you give someone new a MetaMask account, it's kind of like putting someone who doesn't know how to ride a bike on a bike and like shoving them down a mountain. Like they can go anywhere, they can do everything, and they don't know how to do most of it. It doesn't make sense to me why there's so much freedom right away for a lot of users who maybe don't want that kind of freedom yet, because they don't know anything in the space. Like they're able to send money anywhere to any address, any account. They're able to do any transaction, sign anything, and there are no protections for them on top of it. So it's like when you buy a new piece of technology to give it to like your parents, you need to kind of explain how it works, because they didn't grow up with it. It wasn't part of like their innate part of life. And I think blockchain and crypto is definitely not part of the majority of our innate part of life. So I think all of us need to have that kind of learning curve, and there's that lack in the space, right? So Emmanuel's talking about a lot of the things that could help with that, like describing the actual transactions and translating those into real legible words. And then there's also things like, let's say, you know, training wheels on your MetaMask, or just like serve it like a learning mode on your MetaMask that you can toggle on and off for new people. There's nothing stopping us from developing that. And it could save a lot of the little things that happen that turn people off of crypto.
Yeah, those were like two of the greatest analogies, by the way, I've ever heard. Like Emmanuel, you were like terms and services, that's perfect. And Micah, you were like on the bicycle, showing them down this hill, and then training wheels, aggressive. You know, like yeah, yeah, but totally agree. And like one thing I'm wondering is, what do you folks think is part of it, like a mentality shift? Because one of the things, for example, I'm really interested in is like decentralized storage, and you know, decentralized commodities in general. But with storage in particular, it's like, how do we get these businesses to say, hey, it's actually better to spread your trust out around thousands of random computers, properly incentivized around the world, instead of, you know, trusting a Dropbox or trusting an AWS. And so how does that mind shift, you know, how do we get that to happen if we really believe in, you know, these decentralized protocols are going to lower prices, going to offer better security, et cetera, et cetera? And, you know, anyone can take this.
I'll be quick and then let you guys share, but part of me does feel like in order for there to be like a mass rush, right, there always going to be early adopters and people who are willing to be the guinea pigs, but like for the majority, I think there probably will need to be some types of like incidents that occur, a large, and this has happened before, right, plenty of times. You even see like Twitter getting their data breached oftentimes because of like the providers that they're using. But I think we're going to need to see more of these types of incidents where it's just like you have no choice, you know, like even just to save face, like you need a decentralized solution, because of what we've seen. Other big players have gotten compromised due to having all of their stuff in one place.
Mm-hmm.
I would say we need sort of a few hero use cases, like, you know, storage is like an infrastructure. and I cannot like go sell infrastructure to consumers. So there has to be an application. And Dropbox is an interesting use case, but I don't think Dropbox will do it. Something which is maybe games could be one, I don't know, where consumers will be indirectly using these kind of things. And that's where like, that will incentivize the wider adoption of players like, Filecoin, RV kind of stuff. Because technologically speaking, I would prefer RV over S3 any day, because of the cost as well as, the reliability and such. But there's no easy medium for anyone to access it, especially if like people are just not comfortable using MetaMask. How can I expect them to, put stuff on RV?
Yeah, it almost feels like, I like your answer, Gaurav. You're like, we need some killer apps, but like, I'm wondering, what do you guys think? And perhaps this is, you guys are biased here based on what you guys are building, but what do you guys think comes first? Like, is it like we need all these guardrails, we need all the security in place before like there's mass adoption of this one super app that everyone likes that's going to bring in, millions, 10 millions, hundreds of millions of people? Or is it that app comes in, there's a lot of bad things that happen, like you mentioned, Gaurav, these headlines promote us to do like better security? Like, where does that, where do we fall in that spectrum?
I can start off. Yeah.
Okay, sweet.
I think it might be happening at the same time. I think more than one app or one use case bringing in a lot of people, I think we're already starting to see some of the big brands onboarding a ton of regular kinds of people, not regular in the bad sense, just like traditional retail users in the space. And I think what it's going to look like is it's not going to be outright decentralized in the way where people need to handle their seed phrase and understand how smart contracts work. That's not going to happen. With Disney building, with Starbucks building, I think they understand their customers very well, and they're creating retail experiences and subscription experiences and something for their biggest fans. And I think those fans don't necessarily care whether or not they're, they have the private keys to their wallet. They're just going to care about what use cases they're getting out of it, what new experiences, what new feedback and benefit are they getting out of it. And that's going to bring a bunch of bulk users to the platform. And then you have other areas, things like metaverse, things like gaming, which will bring other kinds of people onto the platform who might care more about, like a true decentralization, true ownership, that kind of stuff. But it's going to be a mix, and I think it's already happening right now.
Yeah, I would agree. Second, that it's already happening. And also, like, it's interesting. There are builders who are working on things like new games or social platforms, and they're building on top of the blockchain, but they are very, very much focused on like abstracting the blockchain away as much as possible. I think of two examples. One is called branch.gg. It's a metaverse platform. I think they're launching a game in the next month or so. So you can check that out. And then the social platform I'm thinking about is called Farcaster, which is a newer Web3 focused social platform. And the reason I'm bringing up both these examples is because in both cases, like I've used Farcaster and it feels just like Twitter. If someone told me like, hey, this has no relation to crypto or Web3, and I didn't see like all of like the profile pictures, NFT profile pictures that everyone has, I would probably believe them that like, hey, yeah, this is just like a basic Twitter clone social platform. Now, I think in order for you to abstract away a lot of the blockchain elements, then you kind of have to take the responsibility of making sure that it's secure, and your users who are like interfacing with your platform and kind of maybe completely unaware that it's actually like a blockchain focused thing, you really have to guarantee their safety. So I think a lot of these people who are now like building these solutions that are more geared towards the mainstream, they're still building it on top of Web3 tech, but like trying to abstract away as much of that as possible. I think they will prioritize making sure that their platforms are secure in those ways, because they can't just tell their users to DYOR anymore, because they're trying to bring in users who are clearly not going to DYOR.
Gaurav?
I would say like creating an app which is feature parity is not sufficient for the migration. But I do echo that, some of these apps are pretty cool actually. Ready Pair Me, these kind of stuff like are very futuristic, and I think could be the killer app, to be honest. But we'll have to see.
Yeah, I honestly, I second all of what you guys said. Patrick, I'll toss it to you, but one analogy I want to say is like, when my dad or when people ask me like, this is like really, really complicated, I just tell them like, the internet today is also really, really complicated. There's all these protocols that are run, TCP/IP, HTTPS, but no one thinks of them. No one uses them. Like, and I imagine we're going to be in a future where no one thinks about what chain they're on or what their seed phrase is. These things are eventually going to get built for. And it's, it's really awesome to be talking to founders like yourselves who are literally building for them. Patrick, go for it.
Yeah, definitely, and couldn't agree more with what you guys are saying. I mean, if you look at just a Web 2 example of kind of something similar that's happening, especially with Facebook and Twitter and having to fact check the information that is now being on their platform and being put on their platform, whereas before they were more held like telecom companies, right? Like AT&T isn't responsible for the text messages you send, and that's kind of how they legally were looking at everything. But more and more the government has been shifting towards like, hey, you need, and users as well. User expectation is like, hey, you need to validate these tweets and this information and notify people if there's bad actors in this space. And so, yeah, Micah, you mentioned earlier, you think that it's going to be both working alongside simultaneously. So implementing those types of red flags for people interacting in Web3 versus just building out the platforms and then being like, once everyone gets burned a bunch, then it's like, all right, now we'll put that in. Emmanuel and Grav, I would love to hear your thoughts on that as well. As do you think platforms just going to go out and seek forgiveness later, or do you think that it's going to be a healthy mix of both?
I think we are at a stage where we cannot go with the seek forgiveness approach. I think that approach would have worked 2 years back. I basically believe that things move in like a pendulum. Like, all the ICO boom came in 2017, which was cool to do an ICO via BVI and came in, but now it's no. And then you did have this NFT stuff and DeFi. So people are in the mode where like people are like, you cannot really pull off an NFT, right? Unless like you are actually legit NFT. But like 6 months back, there were like so many shitty NFTs going through. So people are more aware. And I think the platforms are already thinking about using something like what Shimano is building, security being natively being part of the platform. Like you believe it or not, but most platforms are actually doing KYC AML, like under the hood, like whatever they can. Like they are working with Chainalysis, TRM Labs kind of player, which 1 year back from right now would have been like, blasphemy basically. But you have to do what you have to do. So I think there's a middle ground. That's how I think about it. And once we swing the pendulum like a couple of times, we'll reach there.
Yeah, I agree. I think trust is going to be fundamental in getting people to adopt technology, especially decentralized technology as well. Like, yeah, when I talk to my family and parents about it, they're like, well, who's validating all of this and who's actually going to be liable if something gets messed up, right? Like if anybody messes up right now, or if Google messes up something, like I can point the finger and have somebody to blame, where the concept of not having anyone in particular to point a finger at is going to be a huge challenge to overcome. And so I'd love to hear your perspective on that. I mean, one of the reasons why, and Kavi and I talked about this before, but the immutability of blockchains, so their inability to be rolled back requires you getting it right the first time. And especially when it comes to people who are stealing like information via phishing scams and being able to recover any of that, any of the value that you're sending or any of the coins that you're sending. We'd love to hear if there's any others, like if you guys are working on, or if you know of anyone who is working on things that are helping to have that ability to track and then also recover potential mistakes when you're transacting in Web3.
I can share. So we're not working on anything about that, so I'll be quick. But I know there are some kind of insurance style products that are being working on are being worked on right now. Harpy is a company that essentially you can like gate your NFTs, or you can make your NFTs non-transferable except to whitelisted wallets. So only wallets that you say, hey, I'm willing to send this person an NFT, can take any of your NFTs. So if you ever stumble on like a wallet drainer contract and it tries to remove your NFT and give it to another wallet, it'll basically, get stopped by a firewall. I know there are people also working on like new ERC, essentially ERC protocols that would allow like reversible transactions. This is something that, a lot of people in the space are not super excited about, because it kind of like undoes a lot of the the benefits of immutability that really matter to people in the space. So I think the solution is going to be interesting. I'm very curious what you guys think about this, because like it's not just a technical problem, it's also kind of like a ideological problem as well.
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely a philosophical issue of like, is a centralized entity, is this going to have to be more centralized for people and institutions in particular to get more comfortable working with it, right? The inability to go back and recover a transaction or reverse a transaction is, it's very permanent. It's set in stone, and so it's a huge risk. I'd love to hear Micah and Gaurav, your perspectives on this as well.
Yeah, I know Micah is like building actual. So maybe Micah, you could talk about what you're actually building, because a lot of to Patrick's initial question, a lot of the tools I think WebAssy is building for.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share. Emmanuel brought up the reversible Ethereum transactions. I saw the Twitter thread kind of announcing that. It's very interesting to read. There's a lot of debate. Again, on the philosophical side, it's kind of interesting to see where people stand on each side. But yeah, at WebAssy, we're building both for kind of pre-preparation, so before anything happens, as well as we're working on like during transaction stuff too, to try to catch some of the known malicious transactions or interactions with known malicious smart contracts. So we're kind of trying to burn both sides. But yeah, we've covered things like I mentioned at the beginning, things like a backup wallet. So this is where you lose access. So that's just user error, right? But there's also use cases with the backup wallet that we didn't think about before until people started using it and then came to us. So for example, we had someone who they clicked on something and they had like an ETH drainer happening on their wallet. So they no longer had ETH in the wallet to be able to move NFTs out of it, but the NFTs were still in the wallet, right? And so every time they sent ETH to the wallet, it would get drained right away. And so this is where something like a use case of the backup wallet that I didn't even think about, but it's something where they were able to recover stuff. So that's one thing that you just never know what kind of new stuff is going to pop up in the space to cover for that maybe you have built something for or not. And then when it comes to the panic button, this is kind of if you feel like you may have done something that gave malicious access to your wallet, or your wallet's part of a vulnerability that you heard about, for example, the Solana hack that happened a couple of weeks ago. This is where you can transfer one click everything to a backup wallet pre-signed. So this is like, there's all kinds of use cases for that too. But I think it's just a matter of like iteration time, especially when so much of this is firefighting rather than being able to kind of lay the land so it doesn't happen in the first place. But that's overall security. It's a lot of reaction and not proactive action.
Yeah, just so we could be like educational too for the folks in the audience. I think it'd be, because I know like when I first learned this, it was super cool. I think if I'm not mistaken, one of you guys on the call explained this to me in our call that we first had, but I would love if Micah or one of you guys could explain how like you basically front run transactions in the mempool and you're able to like put a safe transaction before the fraudulent one or the malicious one gets through.
I mean, that's not what we're doing, but that's the company I just mentioned, Harpy.
Nice.
So yeah, that's exactly what they do. Yeah, if there's a transaction that's going to a non-whitelisted wallet with one of your like high value NFTs, like your Bored Ape, you have said the only wallet. Matter of fact, I don't want my Bored Ape going to any wallet, right? So if your Bored Ape ever starts a transfer to another wallet, it would detect that and submit another transaction with much higher gas than the scam transaction and say, hey, no, take this Bored Ape and actually pull it into this like secure vault that you've pre-approved. So in some ways, like similar to WebAssy, what you just explained, Micah. But yeah, I think that's a very interesting solution.
Yeah, and for the folks in the audience, like what makes this possible is because these blockchains, they have what's called a mempool, which is basically like, think of like the lobby for all these transactions before the people running the blockchain validate them, put them on a block, add them to the chain. And that feature also allows you to build all these security tools, because you could scan it in your example, Emmanuel, you could say, hey, the Bored Ape is leaving. That's in a transaction. You could put another transaction in that mempool that has the same sort of number, transaction number, and then put higher gas fees. And the reason the higher gas fees one will win is because these miners are essentially trying to optimize for like revenue per block. They want to get the most money possible from adding blocks onto the chain. And so they'll pick the secure transaction, which the safety that WebAssy, that Immuna, whatever is providing, they'll pick that one first. which is, that was really cool to hear when I first learned about it. Patrick, I know you had some questions that maybe the folks in the audience would like to hear, and I want to leave maybe some 5-10 minutes at the end, 5 minutes for Q&A. I'll hand it to you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we had a question in the chat, and it's pretty
Oh,
much
nice.
an adoption question, but it's but Bernie asked it. Thank you, Bernie, for asking the question. But based on the conversation today and other information, mass adoption of DeFi and Web3 seems to be at least a decade away. Overly complex user interaction, lack of regulatory clarity, technological immaturity, all will take time. Can the panel convince me I'm wrong? I love it. Hot takes. Let's go.
Yeah, let's go.
I would say I agree. It's a decade away, at least in US.
Oh, okay.
I'm happy. I want to hear
It's
this.
the same thing in Venezuela is my question. I think it's probably like less than 5 years is my take. So again, boiling down the same thing. People believe that something works in like the Western countries, so it works across. But like an example, Nigeria, from what I heard like from a friend yesterday, that things are moving much faster over there as compared to what they are moving in US, because there are different dynamics at play. Like as an example, in India, the credit cards were never a thing. India leapfrog from like paying in cash all the way using wallets and this kind of stuff. So I think some of these countries, like in Latin countries like Southeast Asia, Africa, they're gonna like leapfrog on these kind of technology. That's just my prediction, because there's just need for it. They just don't trust some of these centralized agencies, and that's where crypto is a great fit. I'm not sure if it's going to be like Solana, like that's debatable. If there's enough incentives, a lot of people will come in and build. That's how I think about it.
That's a really great point, by the way. Like, and I'm glad you brought it up because it kind of clarifies my thinking too. We're seeing the countries where they kind of have a lower bar to begin with, leading an adoption for crypto, because all the benefits to crypto, maybe for folks like us who have great access to financial services already, it's not necessarily needed to have state-free money, or it's not necessarily needed to have high yield savings, because but places where their currency is like vanishing via inflation, they don't want to trust their central bank, they're going to go to crypto first. And I think that's part of the answer to the question in chat. Micah, Manuel, maybe if you guys have something about the 10-year timeline to
I think 10 years is a really
against.
long time. I'm against the 10-year timeline. I think it's really going to be heavily dependent on what kind of use cases people actually come up with, and if that's influential for people. I think gaming is something that we're really sleeping on. I think the gaming population, particularly in Asia, is something that's onboarding tons of people into the space. So that's one. I think, again, I mentioned big brands, but I think that's something that's also going to, in a different way, onboard a ton of people into the space within the next year, right? These are things that are coming out today, tomorrow. Even Nike and Adidas have done a great leap into either acquiring some sort of Web3 company or bringing some sort of Web3 project into the space, which a ton of money is poured into. You can't deny the amount that people are spending in the space, whether or not we're in a bear market or not. I didn't say the word, but yes. So I am against the 10-year timeline. I think it'll be a different time arc for different populations.
That's a really great point as well. Like, he mentioned 10 years for crypto, but what you're saying, Micah, is that crypto is not just this one thing. There's a lot of different things. So maybe we're not talking about financial services, but for a brand like Nike to give you a digital twin of your sneaker that you buy, and you could go do cool things with that, that might not take 10 years. And that's Web3, and that's a use case. So that was really great.
Yeah, I'll just point out one other thing along the same lines of that, like in the gaming use case, the metaverse use case as well. I was just on like a McKinsey metaverse 1 hour webinar for alumni. And one of the stats that they shared, which I wasn't aware of, was that there was a Travis Scott concert in the metaverse that had like 13 million viewers or 13 million guests at this concert. That's a ridiculous amount of people. Like, and I feel that the vast majority of people, even folks who are like super deep in crypto, are just like not aware of that fact. And so like, give it 2 years, give it 5 years. Like I think that number is going to blow up big time. So I think metaverse is also a use case that's very much slept on in terms of what it's going to do to adoption.
Wow. Emmanuel, quick question. So was that really the metaverse, or was it like Fortnite or something? Like what?
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Actually, it was Roblox. It was Roblox.
Okay, but still,
so
I know what you're saying.
No, you're absolutely right. But yeah, I would hope that a lot of that audience, I mean, I would hope that Travis Scott would
Yeah.
bring his audience over to the metaverse, provided the right incentives.
You're right. Like at the very least, what it is proof of concept. Like people at scale want these digitally native experiences, want to go attend cool things online. And if you could do it in Roblox, people would probably like to do it on other platforms as well. Makes a lot of sense. Patrick, do you have any closing remarks? I know we're sort of winding down here.
Yeah, we're ending up on time. Like I know we're in our last 10 minutes here. So I wanted to like ask kind of a futurist question. So to be like, and Emmanuel, you touched on it earlier as to what sort of the future of security can look like and the security experience, like identity verification and sort of personal keys will go away. Micah, you mentioned touched on that as well. But would love to hear a little bit more elaboration from everyone is like, what's the best case scenario, like in your wildest imagination? Like, what do you think it's going to look like? And what role do you think sort of hardware might even play in that, like biometrics? Like, do you think there's any potential integration with the hardware providers like Apple and Google and Samsung to be able to facilitate identity verification in Web3? So would love to hear just, yeah, what do you see as the future? What do you think? And how is what you're building sort of incorporated into that?
Yeah. I mean, go for it, Micah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah,
No.
I think identity verification, authentication is a super close problem to my heart, just because as an international person, like, it's something that's super frustrating to have to prove your identity or prove bank statements of where you live, that kind of thing. And I also previously worked for a cybersecurity company that was developing biometrics and that could identify you based on gait, like the way you walk, which is crazy. It's pretty cool. But for a very sitting society, like it's tough because we all sit all the time.
Yeah.
Regardless, my ideal is that you are your own authentication. Like just by living and breathing, you can prove who you are, whether that's through biometrics, whether that's through like the things that we own and the knowledge that we know. I'm surprised we haven't gotten there yet, just in typical Web 2, but I think we have a lot of opportunity to prove history on Web 3, to be able to track that history. So I'm super bullish on identity use cases in this space, and I'll pause there because I could just go on forever.
Yeah, just to add to that, I know like, and yeah, like you said with Web 2, we still like identity isn't and identity verification isn't as seamless as I'd like. I wish I could just tie every single login that I have on my computer to the facial recognition on my phone where it just sees my face and everything just gets automatically unlocked. Like I hate signing into Salesforce. I despise it. And so like whenever I can make that more seamless, it's like it's me. My computer should know it's me. I have like 10 cameras within a 5-foot proximity of me. Like we should be able to figure that out. And so I think you're right. I think there's a huge opportunity for Web3 to sort of leapfrog Web 2 in that and provide that use case. And for me, that would get me on board even more if I could do that in some capacity. But Manuel, I would love to again hear your guys' perspectives on what you see as like the future experience for identity verification.
So yeah, like what's the end game?
Yeah.
How far in future are you talking about? 10 years, 100 years?
Yeah, let's call it, let's give you 100 years and then you're like, long term for us, like 20 years, 10 years. Like that'd be cool.
In 100 years, I probably want like a bionic chip in my head. Like,
Just Neuralink.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I just think about paying you. I'm like, I want to pay Gaurav.
Yeah, like if I want to learn, say, jujutsu, then I just learned it, sort of stuff.
Oh, have you seen the show Chuck? Have you seen the show Chuck ever?
No, I have not actually.
It's literally that. Like he downloads so much information into his brain with this like super glasses, and then like he knows jujitsu, he knows every language. He's like a super spy. But sorry, I cut you off.
That's my dream come true. That's my a wish, like from my childhood, like if I could do that. But anyways, yeah, I think identity is one of the possible hero use cases. Identity with zero knowledge proof, because in certain parts of the world and different segment, people want privacy, and that's like a fair ask. So identity could be a hero use case for Web3. In Web 2, identity is like a pain, like things are happening around the world. I don't know, like call out a specific situation, but like where people want to organize things, and but don't want to be targeted for that. So identity could really be a hero use case here.
I'll just add, let's say in the 5 to 10 years trajectory, definitely still around identity, but more so from like hey, like we don't want bad people interacting in our spaces. I do tend to feel like even though it seems like the space is riddled with a lot of bad actors at times, A lot of times these bad actors are kind of, at least in the same organization, or it's the same people just repeatedly doing the same scams that are continuing to work, right? I think at some point we will be able to kind of gate off a lot of experiences from bad actors that have been flagged in the past. Obviously, like, you can create a new crypto wallet, and from that standpoint, I mean, currently there's really no way that people have been able to tie two different crypto wallets to one another, aside from just like really obvious transaction patterns. But I do think at some point we will get to a stage where you do need to have some level of history, right? If you're just making a crypto wallet for the first time and trying to use a new platform, that is comparable to being essentially a scammer, because you don't have any like positive history. So yeah, I get excited by a lot of the people who are working on like credit reports right now in the crypto space, wallet scoring once again. And I do believe that in the next 5 years or so, we will see that data integrated across a lot of different platforms, just to gate off a lot of the negative presence that we're seeing across social, across gaming, Discord, and financial protocols as well, like OpenSea.
Yeah, really cool. And I also want to say, like, as you guys were saying this, I was like, yeah, all this stuff is like amazing, and I believe it's going to exist one day. But like, for that question, I think in the audience too, it's like, I think it's important to consider what already exists today as it is. Like, because I was having a talk with another founder the other day. He told me about the Argentinian currency, the Argentinian peso, and I Googled it on that call, and it, like, basically the bottom line is just been steadily decreasing in value forever for the last like 10 years. And it's like, that's a real problem for people who are there, and they're trying to save. Historically, they've been trying to get their money into US dollars, and the Argentinian government caps it at like $250 a day or something like that, which is like insane that a government's trapping you into their own currency that they themselves are mismanaging. And like, now, even today, with crypto and with stable coins, like, people can solve that problem, more or less. And like, I just want to ask one more question. Maybe this will be our last, because it's from the chat. Alula asks, how do you see Web3 security impacting telecom? Any ideas here, folks? I know we're not telecom industry experts here, but any thoughts? Maybe I can go then. Like, here's what I think, Alula. I think like there's a big trend happening called decentralized wireless, and there's these networks like Helium and Pollen that are coming out. And one of the benefits where essentially these are networks of people who are getting incentivized via tokens to host hotspots in their house, and these hotspots use like electromagnetic radiation. They provide essentially, yeah, there we go, Lula. She's saying HNT in the chat. But one of the benefits, so you're familiar, but one of the benefits of these networks, purportedly, and I haven't dived deep enough, is privacy. Like, the big telco companies today, they can see the actual data, the zeros and ones being transferred through their network. And if needed, they could look at that data. But with a decentralized model, something like Helium or Pollen, the people actually running the infrastructure, running the network, don't have access to the data going through that network. So, the counter argument to that is it's still reliant as like on the internet service provider. Still, that hotspot is connected to your modem right now, but perhaps other satellites is coming. Starlink just did something with T-Mobile, and T-Mobile's doing something with Helium. So that's sort of what I was thinking of that question. But I know we're on time here. I just want to thank you, Micah, thank you, Manuel, thank you, Gaurav. This was really awesome for Patrick and I. Please feel free to take these last minutes to shout out anything we're doing. I see the poll is up. People in the audience will vote, and we'll make those intros as they come in. But yeah, any closing thoughts from anyone?
Yeah, or anything you'd like to plug or promote? Where can people find you? What's your socials? You going to any events lately? Like, yeah, this is your chance to plug anything you feel like.
Well, some plugs.
Hey Patrick, and Kavi, good job, plug and play to come out of the hiatus and keep doing more.
Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, a couple plugs. I'm gonna just type it in, but you can connect with Shield on Twitter. We just set up a new Twitter account. We've been doing a bunch of Twitter spaces with other security founders. So first of all, Micah and Gaurav would love to sync up with you guys in those types of opportunities. but also anybody who is active on Twitter. These conversations tend to be pretty insightful and dive really deep into other areas of security as well. So definitely feel free to tap in on Twitter.
I think Kavi just dropped our links too, so thank you, Kavi. But I'll be at Converge. It's the Circle Ventures Summit and Conference this week in SF, so come find me if you're around. WebOC's Twitter is up there and website's up there too, and Emmanuel would love to hop on Twitter space and go around. We should all get together.
Definitely, yeah. We should all get together and like building exciting things, both of you. We'd love to connect with folks here. I'll just drop my Twitter as well. I'm a DM over here.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I know I learned a ton about where we're at currently with Web3 security and where we want to go. So yeah, thanks again for sharing your insights. Yeah, always happy to host you guys at the HQ if you stop by. If you're down in Sunnyvale, please hit us up.
Bye, folks. Thanks for joining.
See you guys.